It was one of those perfect Saturday mornings where the air feels fresh enough to start over. The streets of Willow Creek were quiet except for the distant sound of sprinklers ticking in someone's yard. I turned onto my street slowly, savoring the moment. After years of sleepless nights, running my own private security consultancy, after missing holidays and spending weeks in dangerous assignments overseas, this was my reward, a midnight sapphire Rolls-Royce Phantom, the kind of car you don't just drive, you glide in. The sunlight danced on the polished chrome hood ornament, and the deep rumble of the engine made me smile like a kid. The houses here were picture-perfect cream siding and manicured lawns. Neighbors liked it that way, and by neighbors, I mostly meant the Homeowners Association, run with an iron fist by Karen Whitmore. I'd heard stories about her. People said she could tell you the length of every lawn on the block to the millimeter. She never went anywhere without her clipboard, her visor, and her righteous sense of authority. That morning, Karen was by the mailbox, as if she'd been waiting. She stopped mid-scribble when she saw my Rolls-Royce, her mouth hanging open for half a second before tightening into a frown. She started walking toward me, and I could see it, the little bounce in her step, like she had found a fresh rule to enforce. "You can't park that here," she said the moment I stepped out of the car. I raised an eyebrow. "It's my driveway, doesn't matter. That kind of vehicle isn't approved for community aesthetics." She flipped through her clipboard like she was searching for the exact bylaw number. Exotic or luxury vehicles should be stored inside a garage to preserve the neighborhood's visual harmony. I laughed under my breath. Visual harmony? It's a car, Karen. Her voice sharpened. It's an eyesore. It screams, "Show off." This is a family community, not a Hollywood movie set. I looked around. Half the houses had oversized SUVs in the driveway. So, my car is a problem. But Brad's lifted truck isn't. "That's different," she shot back. "Trucks are practical. That thing is flaunting wealth. And that's not the kind of image Willow Creek should project." I could feel my patience thinning. "Karen, with all due respect, this car isn't hurting anyone. I bought it fair and square. It's mine. It's legal. And I'm parking it here." Her lips curved into something between a smirk and a sneer. "We'll see about that." I went inside, shaking my head, but I couldn't shake the feeling that she meant it as more than just a warning. From my kitchen window, I caught her snapping a photo of my car, then jotting something down. By evening, I had an email from the HOA, notice of violation, unauthorized vehicle parking, $500, fine. No appeal instructions, just pay within 14 days to avoid additional penalties. It would have been laughable if it wasn't so ridiculous. I sent a short reply saying I wouldn't be paying and cited the actual bylaws, which said nothing about luxury vehicles. The next day, another notice came, then another. One accused me of reflective glare causing visual impairment to drivers. Apparently, my car's shine was now a safety hazard. Another said, my vehicle color disrupts the aesthetic continuity of the neighborhood. It was becoming obvious. Karen wasn't just enforcing rules. She was on a mission to make me regret ever parking that car in Willow Creek. And I had no idea just how far she'd go, or how quickly this petty game was going to turn into a full-blown war. The morning after the third violation notice, I stood on my porch holding a stack of envelopes from the HOA, each thicker than the last. My neighbor, Jim, was walking his dog and stopped to glance at the pile in my hands. "She's after you now," he said quietly. "You made the list." "The list?" I asked. Jim nodded gravely. "People who don't fall in line. I used to have flower pots by my mailbox. Took her 3 weeks of citations before I gave up. Karen doesn't stop until she gets what she wants." I wasn't about to be intimidated over a car, so I decided to push back. I sent the HOA a formal letter, disputing the fines, citing state property laws, and reminding them that the bylaws made no mention of prohibiting luxury vehicles. I even included photos of other neighbors' cars, the massive lifted truck with chrome rims, the candy red sports car 2 streets over. 3 days later, I got a reply. Not from the HOA's admin desk, but directly from Karen. The letter was dripping with sarcasm, full of vague threats about further enforcement measures and community standards, violations under review. But what really caught my eye was the line at the bottom. "You may find your presence here to be less than welcome should this continue." It was subtle, but it was a warning, and it made my gut tighten. That weekend, I noticed Karen taking new photos of my driveway from different angles, even kneeling to snap shots of my license plate. A day later, I came home to find 2 men in suits standing by my car. They introduced themselves as insurance investigators and claimed they were there to verify the vehicle's ownership status. "Who sent you?" I asked. "Anonymous. Tip," one of them replied, looking almost bored by now. I knew exactly who had tipped them off. It got worse. One evening, while taking out the trash, I overheard Karen talking to a small group of neighbors at the end of the street. She spoke just loud enough for me to catch phrases like "probably not even paid for," "shady business," and "wouldn't be surprised if it's stolen." It wasn't just petty gossip anymore. She was actively trying to plant suspicion. And then, the final blow in her setup landed. On a Thursday morning, just before I was about to head into a client call, 2 police officers knocked on my door. One of them held a folded piece of paper, a warrant. "We've received a report regarding this vehicle," the taller officer said, pointing to my driveway. "Allegations of fraud, possible stolen property. We need to ask you some questions." Behind them, I saw Karen standing on the sidewalk with her arms crossed, her phone out, recording everything. I didn't know it then, but her report to the police was so detailed, so carefully worded, that it was enough to set the stage for what was coming next. And in less than an hour, I'd be in handcuffs with half the neighborhood watching. The officers stood at my doorway, polite but firm, while Karen lingered in the background like a vulture waiting for a carcass to stop moving. I could feel her eyes burning into me as I stepped outside. "Sir, we just need to verify a few things," the taller officer said, nodding toward my driveway. "The report alleges the vehicle was purchased using fraudulent funds and may be linked to illegal business operations." "That's ridiculous," I replied, pulling out my wallet. "I can show you the bill of sale, the bank transfer, whatever you need." Karen chimed in, her voice dripping with fake concern. "We just want to make sure everything is above board. This is a family neighborhood." One of the officers gave her a sideways glance but didn't say anything. I handed over the paperwork, but after a moment of scanning, the taller officer said, "Sir, we'll need you to come with us. We can clear this up downtown." I froze. "You're arresting me? For my own car? It's standard procedure." "Sir, you're not being charged yet, but we have to follow up on the allegations." Karen's smirk was wide enough to be seen from space. "I knew it," she said to no one in particular, but loud enough for every neighbor within earshot to hear. The cold metal of the handcuffs bit into my wrists as the officers guided me toward the patrol car. Phones were out everywhere, neighbors pretending to be checking their mail or watering their lawns while actually recording every step I took. Karen stood front and center, phone raised, narrating to her audience as if she were some investigative journalist. "This is what happens," she said into her phone, "when people think they can flaunt the rules and get away with it. Not in my neighborhood." The squad car door closed with a heavy thunk, cutting off the sounds of the street, but not the heat rising in my chest. My mind was racing. What exactly had she told them? How had she made her lies so convincing? At the station, they took my fingerprints, photographed me, and placed me in a small windowless room. No phone, no clock, just for gray walls and the lingering echo of Karen's voice in my head. After what felt like an eternity, the same officers returned. "You can make one call," the shorter one said, sliding a phone across the table. There was only one person I trusted for this. Mike, my longtime friend and attorney. I didn't even need to explain much. The second I mentioned Karen's name and the words police report, he sighed heavily and said, "Hang tight. I'll be there in under an hour." When the door closed again, I leaned back in the metal chair, my wrist still sore from the cuffs. One thing was certain, Karen had gone all in, and she had no idea she'd just made the biggest mistake of her life. The heavy metal door swung open, and there he was, Mike Donovan, my friend of 15 years and one of the sharpest attorneys in the state. He walked in with that calm, controlled energy that made juries lean forward and opposing lawyers sweat. It was laughable. Half a dozen printed screenshots of old business contracts from my security firm, a couple of bank transaction records that were public information, and a letter she had written summarizing her concerns about my suspicious lifestyle. She'd even highlighted the part about my Rolls-Royce, calling it an asset inconsistent with community income norms. Mike looked up at the officers. "Where did she get these documents?" The taller officer shrugged. "She didn't say just that. She'd been given them anonymously." Mike's jaw tightened. "If she accessed his business records without permission, she's violated state and federal privacy laws. My client holds contracts with the Department of Homeland Security. You know what that means?" The officers exchanged a look. "We weren't aware." Mike leaned back, his voice measured but laced with weight. "The Rolls-Royce was a gift from a federal director as a thank you for my client's work, protecting sensitive operations. The funds are clean, the title is clean, and the only crime here is a malicious neighbor weaponizing law enforcement to settle a petty HOA dispute." The taller officer sighed. "All right, you're free to go." The cuffs were removed, and I rubbed my wrists as Mike gathered the papers. But before we left, he turned to the officers. "You may want to forward this matter to your fraud and cybercrime unit. If she's been poking around in federal contractor files, that's not just nosy, it's criminal." The ride home in Mike's car was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "We're going to make her regret ever trying this." When we pulled into my driveway, Karen was outside again, standing with a group of neighbors. Her smile faltered when she saw me step out of Mike's car instead of the back of a squad car. Mike didn't say a word to her, but he gave her a look that said everything. Her smirk vanished completely when she noticed the manila folder under his arm, the same one that held all the proof we needed to turn this entire situation on its head. Karen thought she'd humiliated me. She had no idea she'd just handed me the ammunition for her own downfall. The next week, I walked into the monthly HOA meeting with Mike by my side. The room was packed, word had spread about my arrest, and every curious neighbor wanted front seats to whatever drama would unfold. Karen sat at the head of the table, like a queen on her throne, tapping her pen and smirking when she saw me. "You're late," she said, loud enough for the crowd to hear. "I assume you've come to offer the neighborhood an explanation for your lifestyle." Mike didn't flinch. "Actually, we've come to discuss yours." That got a murmur from the crowd. Karen blinked. "Excuse me." Mike opened the manila folder and began laying out document after document, emails Karen had sent to third parties, attempting to dig into my financial records, screenshots proving she'd accessed restricted online databases, and a written statement from the local police chief confirming my complete innocence. Karen's fake confidence started to crack. "This is absurd. I was only committing multiple felonies." Mike cut in, his voice calm but sharp. "You used your position as HOA president to harass a homeowner, spread false accusations, and involve law enforcement under false pretenses. You also attempted to obtain and share private government contractor records, which, by the way, is a federal crime." Gasps rippled through the room. One neighbor stood and muttered, "She's been doing this to all of us." Another chimed in, "I told you she was trouble." Mike handed Karen a letter. "This is your official desist, along with notice of a civil lawsuit for defamation, harassment, and invasion of privacy. My client is also pressing criminal charges." Karen's face went pale. Her voice trembled. You can't do this to me." I finally spoke, my voice steady. "You did this to yourself. All because you couldn't stand the sight of my car." The HOA board members whispered among themselves before the vice president stood. "Effective immediately, Karen, you're removed as HOA president. You've shamed this community and put us all at risk." The room erupted, some clapping, some shaking their heads. Karen gathered her papers in a trembling mess and stormed out, her heels clicking down the hall like gunshots. I stayed behind, answering my neighbors' questions and shaking hands. For the first time in months, the tension in the neighborhood lifted. As I stepped outside into the warm night, I glanced at my Rolls-Royce parked in the driveway, the chrome gleaming under the streetlights. Mike joined me, grinning. "Thinks she'll learn her lesson?" he asked. I smirked. "No, but she never get close enough to try again." The purr of the engine filled the quiet street as I pulled away, leaving behind the HOA drama and Karen's reign of petty tyranny in my rearview mirror.